Well, this is a very casual session, a fireside chat. So for all the participants, there is a Q&A box. So please put your questions in. And yeah, we would love to hear from you through the box. So it seems like mostly Malaysia, Singapore and Malaysia, you're in with us in this room. I know it's still quite early in Indonesia. Okay, we've got 2 more minutes. It looks like Jen will just be a little bit late, but that's fine. We've got a bit of an intro. So for those who've just joined, please fill out the poll. We'd love to see where you're dialing in from and what industry you work in. I love seeing social enterprises in the room. So welcome to all the founders. Great to have you. Good morning, everyone who's dialed in. I think we'll just give it 1 more minute. I know everyone, usually it's about a minute or two. So we'll just give, I know it's early in the morning, so we'll just give a little bit of grace this morning for people to join us. If you've just joined us, please complete the poll. We just want to see where you're dialing in from and what sector you're from as well.
We have Jian.
Great, Jian's with us in the room now.
Hello.
Good morning, Jian. How are you?
Hi, good morning. Sorry, a bit late.
No, that's okay.
Thank you.
It's early
You
morning.
can see me.
Okay, so we might just actually just dive straight in. Good morning, everyone. My name is Wen, and thank you for joining us this morning. We had a great day yesterday. We had 3 amazing sessions. It was a big day, but it was so good because there was like over 100 over joining us each session. The interactions were great, really great sharing, and I think I went away inspired. So I really hope that today is going to be the same thing. Please, we really want people to interact. So there is a Q&A box at the bottom. So if you've come into the session and you already have questions that's burning, please put it in. And I'll explain how this session, this is slightly different from the rest, where it's actually a 2-part. So it will be the same time tomorrow morning to come back in, and we're going to do a deep dive on your questions. Because I'm sure at this time, funding is so critical, and a lot of people will have questions. So we really want to take that time and not rush through it. So for those who don't know very much about TBN, thank you for joining us and coming along. So very quickly, we're an organization about fighting poverty through enterprise. We believe in an ecosystems approach to support local social entrepreneurs in Southeast Asia. And we really believe in collaboration, empowerment, dignity, hope, and restoration. So how we approach with the ecosystem, we work with, all the ecosystem players. We welcome and we want to partner up, and hence you can see even on the panels that we have throughout the conference, there are so many different people from different countries joining us. But within TBN, we do have 5 kind of focuses. So we have a social enterprise training hub, which is a training program, and some of them are going to be pitching this week. An expertise network, which is skills-based volunteering, so get in touch with us. Conference and events, which is happening right now, and we're going to have webinars throughout the year as well. The investors club, which is basically a group of people who want to be impact investors themselves, and we journey with them, and that will be launching in June, July. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And the resilience program, which actually I won't touch on because Alex is here today to talk more about it during the session. So all of this would not be made possible without the sponsors. Thank you so much, our sponsors and partners, for journeying with us through this conference that we pulled together literally in 6 weeks, just to respond to what's happening now with the pandemic. Everyone will know that all the money from the sponsors and partners and the ticket sales will go to the resilience program. And yet again, it'll be something that Alex will talk about. We have the poll. So for those who've just joined us, please take just 2 seconds to do the poll, where you're dialing in from, and also what industry you're working in. And we'd just like to just share that in probably a couple of seconds so everyone can see who else is in the room. That would be great.
Results are in.
Results are in. Okay, so we've got 58% in from Singapore, Malaysia next down. Thank you for people in Indonesia. I know it's early, you're joining us. Other Southeast Asian countries, Australia, a shout out, and to others as well. And we have lots of social entrepreneurs in this call. So please, this session is for you guys to ask questions to the funders, and we will actually answer and go deep into those questions tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. But please put all your questions in there. And today will just be a very relaxed chat that Stella, our moderator, will take us to. So without further ado, Stella, over to you. Stella is the CEO and CFO of YCAB Ventures, and she's dialing in from Indonesia. Thank you, Stella.
Thanks, Wen. So good morning, everyone. Welcome again to TBN Asia Virtual Conference. It is my great pleasure to be hosting this session that the title cannot be more true in times of pandemic that does not discriminate and really felt by every one of us. So if we were to survive this together, then we really need to join hands. So all hands on deck. This session will be deep diving into co-funding solutions for social enterprises and how both funders and also social enterprises can take part in this movement. Throughout the TBN conference, you might have heard resilience program mentioned over and over again, and this session will discuss the nuts and bolts of the Resilience Fund. I would like to remind you again that this is a 2-hour session divided into 2 days, where tomorrow we'll be focusing on answering all of your questions. So do type in your questions and we'll cover them tomorrow. So without further ado, it is an honor for me to introduce our speakers today. Very seasoned impact investors with years of experience. I am very sure we will have an exciting morning in Asia and a great evening chat in the US or wherever that you might be dialing in from. So our first speaker is Alex T from the TBN Resilience Program. Alex is a homeschooling father and investor. He loves a living education that nourishes the mind and the heart. He is also passionate about quality enterprises that create value for others, serving the common good. Prior to become a home educator, Alex was the COO of Garden Impact Investments, a social impact fund, and a CEO of Bank of America Singapore Limited, a global investment bank. Our second speaker is Ted Levinson from Beneficial Returns. Ted Levinson is founder and CEO and is an experienced finance professional who specializes in using debt to produce a blended social impact and financial return. With more than 20 years in finance and the most recent 7 in social finance, he has been deeply involved in the growth of the social finance industry, providing a role model for other impact investors rooted in rigor and a willingness to provide risk capital to promising social enterprises. Ted has worked across impact areas, including sustainable agriculture that links global and local supply chains to deliver more value to producers. Education, including job training and employment for those with barriers to employment. The environment, including sustainable energy and waste reduction, and livelihood development for those in emerging markets. In 2014, he was one of 9 Americans selected as an Eisenhower Fellow. Our last speaker is Jan Lee Yu, or Jan, from Citrine Capital. She envisioned a world where knowledge, action, and capital complement. Jen dedicates her career to the impact sector. She is the managing partner of Citrine Capital, an impact investing firm based in Malaysia. Through her role, she actively supports mission-driven businesses through the provision of financial capital and social innovation capital, aiming to propel them to the next level. She also collaborates with strategic partners across sectors to seize opportunities and achieve common goals. Her bachelor's degree is in biochemistry at the University of Melbourne, and her master's degree is in international development at King's College London. So welcome all speakers, and again, welcome to all attendees for the session. So let's start the session with knowing about the origin story of all of our speakers. I think all of them will have very interesting story about how can they now be in the impact sector or the sustainability. Why do they think this is actually, you know, the place that they want to be professionally too? So let's start with the longest in the industry. Maybe Ted, you can start off and kick off the session for us.
Certainly, I'd be happy to do it. Glad to be joining you all this morning. It's evening here on the west coast of the US. So I have a background in small business finance. I have always believed in the power of markets, and I've always believed that small business plays an integral role in our economies. After spending 10 years in conventional small business finance, I was looking for more purpose in my life. And I left a job in California and moved to Indonesia, where I worked as the first business manager for Green School, which is a school with several hundred students now, but I was there right up until it opened with a curriculum focused on sustainability. And so I came to Asia because I was looking for more purpose. Of impact investing. And I realized that it was possible to have a lot of impact and still to remain in the world of finance. So I spent 7 years at an NGO in California and San Francisco called RSF Social Finance. There we made loans to US and Canadian social enterprises. But during my entire time there, I felt there was a much bigger need and a much bigger opportunity to do that work in emerging markets. And that's why 3.5 years ago, I left the best job I ever had to launch Beneficial Returns. We're an impact investing loan fund. We borrow money from philanthropists and faith-based communities. So far, all of our investors are in the US, but we hope to change that. We pool that money and we make long-term loans to social enterprises addressing poverty in Latin America and Southeast Asia. Our investors earn a very modest financial return, but we like to think that they earn a very healthy impact return. To date, we've made a little over $2 million US in loans to a dozen social enterprises. We've returned over 300,000 US to our investors. And just a few weeks ago, we launched an emergency loan fund to provide unsecured, high risk, fast moving capital to social enterprises that were having great impact, but are in jeopardy of going out of business due to the virus.
Ted, are you still there?
I am still there. I was
okay.
done. I was
Okay, because I think your video went black. That's why I wasn't really sure whether you're done or not.
Maybe people want a refund, because I'm sure they were eager to see me in person. I even put on a clean shirt for you folks.
Thank you, Ted. I think it's really inspiring to see that you have actually achieved multiple successes within the space of sustainability and impact. And because I think there's always that lingering question about whether this impact makes sense from an investment perspective as well. But you're a living proof that
it does not linger in my mind at all. So I believe that our financial system is incredibly powerful and incredibly efficient. And if we can deploy those same forces with the goal of making the planet and all its people, put them in a better position, I think that we can achieve so much. I mean, look around you, look at all the skyscrapers, look at all the bridges, look at everything, every Hollywood movie, look at everything that has been produced through markets and finance. And if only we can direct that same capital, that same intelligence, that same efficiency to impact, I think there's no limit to what we can accomplish.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Okay, so let's hear from Alex now. Alex, take it away.
Good morning. Yeah, as Stella mentioned during the introduction, I spent the best part of 15 years in investment banking as a trader in a fixed income and currencies division. I'm grateful for that season because it helped to provide for what was financially a very needy family. 4 younger siblings after me, and our father was declared a bankrupt quite early on. Even then, as the financial vulnerability started to abate, I couldn't really shake off the sense that there is something more to work. It didn't help that I did not aspire to be like any of the managers I reported to. They were materially very well off, but I never saw in them the joy that comes from a life purposefully led. I would argue that there was a lot of material abundance, but there was a real poverty of purpose. I think many of us grow up with this instrumentality view of work, that work is the instrument, it's the means that helps us accomplish all these other ends, right? Like in particular that of livelihood and even some indulgence. But I came to see that in fact, there is an inherent dignity to work. That work can be the means we create value for others. That it can be an outflow of our most deeply held convictions. And in fact, this is corroborated by research. The latter view of work as freedom to serve others, to create value for others, is a much more powerful motivator than the former. And I think the final shoe to fall for me was the recognition that most of us spend our lives in the quest for authority. Yet, authority alone does not make for a life well lived. To truly live and love well, we must embrace meaningful risks, especially on behalf of those who lack the capacity to get out of the pit they find themselves in, sometimes from birth. It is when those entrusted with a measure of authority choose to travel to places of vulnerability and sometimes suffering, so that altogether we stand a chance to dance, that we witness that beautiful phenomenon that is so compelling in my own journey, that of human flourishing. So that began my exploration into the social investing sector, and I worked with Garden Impact Investments for a while with a dear brother Mason. I made some investments corporately as well as personally before, for a time, an even bigger yes made me hit the pause button for a while. I wanted to take responsibility of our children at a time when they were little and fast gathering ideas for life. We wanted to be their primary influence and educator. And since at the time my wife didn't feel like she was up to the task, I took it on and homeschooled our two elder boys for the last year and a half, which turned out just to be a very beautiful and special time. And it's thrilling that since that time, my dear wife has since gathered enough belief to share the load. So that has allowed me a bit more bandwidth to tiptoe into an area I still very much have an affinity towards. Yeah, that's it from me.
A very poetic experience, Alex. You put it very nicely and very touching too. And I think we've heard the same from you and also Ted. Like it's that passion to actually create value and make a difference from the normal that we know of in doing business, and trying to put on a different lens. And actually, when we try to put that lens, we actually make this life more meaningful, not only for us but also for others. Amazing. Super inspired already. So let's hear it from Gian now. Gian, what's your personal story towards impact?
Stella, thank you. Thanks, Alex, for the inspiring story, and Ted for your experiences in the field. So I guess I'm the youngest here as well, so my experiences might not be compatible to my fellow panelists. But I guess what got me into impact investment is that I know it sounds a bit cliche, but I went for gap year in which I went to different developing countries, to Thailand for education purposes, to Philippines for healthcare purposes, to Vietnam for environmental purposes. And after that, I did a Masters of International Development, in which I study a bit of the role of the government, a bit of the role of the private sector, as well as the role of the social sector. And all of this have got their own very silo roles, in which then I spot an social innovation as a means to solve a lot of poverty problems. So then right after I graduated, rather than working for corporates or working as a professional here and there, I jumped right into the impact sectors directly. So then I started working for research centers on education and development, non-profit organizations. But I soon realized that the way they sustain themselves in Malaysia, I'm not sure about anywhere else in the world, is that they rely too heavily on grants and donations. Just the organizations won't sustain in the long run. So then I was like, okay, this might not be, there's still a place for non-profit organizations as well as philanthropic donations, but I would want this to be a lot more sustainable, because if I were to dedicate my entire life into the impact sector from the moment I started working, then I need to make sure that it's me, myself will be sustainable, as well as whatever work will have to be sustainable in the long run as well. So then I did plenty of research, and then I just came upon the impact investments. That's where I hopefully will be able to commit to my passions, which is making an impact, as well as responsibility in keeping myself sustainable, as well as the work that I do. A bit of background about me as well, it's that I also work for a family office, which is my own family. So this gives me a special privilege to have the ability, or at least financial capability, to try to push this impact investment agenda forward. So that's where I combine my responsibility to be financially sustainable and well off, as well as doing what I want to do from the start, impact directly, and combining them into basically just impact investments in general. So I started off my career right on with impact, and I think I will continue doing so for the rest of my life, because this is where I find meaning and purpose, as compared to if I were to work somewhere else. I did try the traditional, to be fair, because of my so to say, obligations for the family. I did try traditional financial roles in which I have to analyze the bonds, the stocks and whatnot, but I don't get a sense of fulfillment from it. So then I was like, no, this is not what I want. I did give it a try, to be fair. So then I have to put in impact somewhere embedded within it, and just impact investment. So that's my story of how I started 2 years in now. Yeah.
Great. It's good to see the other end of the story where, someone just starting, but, have seen the personal impact in terms of making impact investments versus the traditional investments. And also, Jen, if we can move on also now, I think you alluded to also, there's traditional financing, there's grant. So I think right now I want to ask the panelists to sort of we have discussed the purpose of impact investment personally for us, make our life more meaningful. Ted also mentioned that the impact investment also have, purpose for the world, for sustainability, for making this place that we live in a better place. But what really is the purpose of impact investment, in the economy that we live in? Does it really make the economy better? And drawing on from your experiences that you have, what exactly are the impacts being created by these social enterprises that you invested into that cannot be fulfilled by the traditional financing, or even what Wen says, grants that have been alive in our society for longer than what we called impact investments? So maybe we could start with Jan, from your experience and also kind of like a Southeast Asia perspective. What do you think, Jan?
I'm sorry, can you please repeat the question?
Yeah, what exactly is the impact being created by impact investing that cannot be fulfilled by the traditional financing or the grant financing that is available out there?
Sure. Well, to be fair, I think different types of assets, financial means will support different types of causes. And I think to me, impact investment is a bit more unique in its approach, because like for example, Citrian Capital, we look into the education as well as the healthcare industry. So what we do is basically we do a quite intensive research of what are the problems on the ground. For example, education. 1 in 5 Malaysian students actually drop out from high school. Plus, we collate all these different problems on the ground. You might be surprised looking at your face, because Malaysia is upper middle income country, but there are a lot of problems on the ground in which need solutions. So then when we have done a throughout internal research of what's happening on the ground, what are the problems are within this different industry, as well as what are the value chain within this industry. So then whatever startups that we will have to support, that we will invest in, will have to contribute towards these problems in one way or another. The Citrian Capital have already set our own impact objective per se. It's as simple as ensuring affordable and accessible education for all, or healthcare for all. So then whatever startups that we invest in will have to contribute to it then. So then, for example, one of our very first portfolio company, it's actually Thoughtful. So it's a mental health app. So then if you were to imagine, if I'm suffering from mental illnesses, I will have to go to a psychologist or counselor. I might have to pay $500 for an hour, in which I will have to travel to the clinic there. But with investing in impact investment in startup, then we will be able to support these sort of social enterprises, in which they will be able to provide their services at a much lower cost, where people can afford them and people can easily access them, because with the technology that has been going on today. So that this offers a different means as to how it works, because the bigger the startup grows, the bigger the business grows, the bigger the impact will be, because the impact is directly embedded within the business model. There are several business models in which impact can be embedded within them. One of my favorites is actually products and services that is having the so-called beneficiaries as their clients. So then as long as the more you sell, basically the more you sell, the more impact you're going to create, because who are the end users of your products and clients are those who will be benefiting from it. This is just one of the many examples of how impact can be embedded within business model. And so then this is why also I believe in impact investment. In terms of Southeast Asia, like I mentioned, I'm probably more familiar with Malaysian scenario, in which I've done quite intensive research on what's the problem on the ground. But I guess we have all known that Southeast Asia, we have got plenty of problems and poverty here and there, water and sanitation, healthcare, education, which is why I think in this region, there's more of a need for impact investments. This might not be good to say, but the more the problems, I think the more social impact investment will flourish in that sense. But it's the more the better as well, because then we'll be able to attract a lot more capital into this space in which it will be put to proper use. So that's that.
Oh, thank you, Jen. Taking what Jen says about, there's just still a lot of social issues in Southeast Asia, and, drawing from your experience that not only in Indonesia, and also I think you've invested in South America as well. So, from your many investments, what are actually the impacts being created, and sort of like the role that impact investment really filling in that cannot be served by the other available financing?
Sure, happy to answer that. And we have borrowers today in Indonesia. We have a borrower in Cambodia. As of yesterday, we added a borrower in the Philippines, and we have several borrowers in Central America and South America. And so all of our borrowers are addressing poverty. There are 2 billion people that are still living on a tiny fraction of money every day. And we need to lift those people out of poverty. And I believe that social enterprise is our best chance to do that. There just simply is not enough philanthropic money in the world to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And there are too many people that are being left behind by markets. So markets are extraordinarily efficient, but they don't give us everything that we want. The example that I like to give is that there are more cell phones in sub-Saharan Africa than there are toilets. Why is that? Because there's more money to be made with cell phones than there are with toilets. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't also be bringing toilets to poor people all over the world. And I believe business is the most effective way to do that. So what are our borrowers doing? They're bringing affordable electricity to over 10,000 households in Mexico that are off the grid and will never be connected to a grid. They're providing income for smallholder farmers, giving them access to international markets. They're providing affordable education to South Americans, to poor children. They're also providing biodigesters to smallholder farmers in Central America, South America, and also in Cambodia, where they can convert cow or pig manure into energy and fertilizer. And so our borrowers are having tremendous impact now, but these are all very small social enterprises addressing very big global problems. And so I see a need to direct a lot more capital to the most promising social enterprises so that they can grow and do more of what they're already doing. And that's the entire thesis behind beneficial returns. We want to direct more capital to the most promising social enterprises so that they can grow and so that their solutions can reach the scale of the problems that they're trying to address.
Yeah, I think scale is also, especially with the pandemic, I think I've read a couple of media that says that even more people is now falling back into perhaps not poverty, but an income level that is below what they were before the pandemic.
Into poverty. So for the first time in 30 years, we will have more people next year that are considered very poor than we had in 2020. And so we've been on a long and very positive trajectory that doesn't get nearly enough attention. But the number of people, we have chipped away at poverty. We've cut the poverty rate in half in 20 years and have continued to make improvements on a global basis. But this pandemic is pushing us the other way. And so we need to do whatever we can to overcome that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Alex, from your experience in Garden Impact, and also I think what you see throughout the TBN network, what's your view on this?
Sure. I'll just offer an idea, and this is really behind focus. I think social enterprises, when they come on board, there is this mindset, and the best ones, I would argue, have this beyond the self kind of motivation where they seek to create value for others, for their stakeholders, for their communities, for their customers, for their employees, to the extent almost of disadvantaging themselves in order to create this value for others. And so when they do well, people rejoice. The people around them, the people that have been watching them, the investors that have put money in them to own them, to support them, everybody rejoices because these people at one point in time were able to disadvantage themselves to create value for others. Whereas traditional enterprises would seek to advantage the self, would to benefit the self, sometimes at the expense of others. So I think this is a clear bifurcation in focus. That's my input.
Yep. Just touching base on when you say disadvantaging themselves to the advantage of others, can you elaborate a bit more on that point?
Sure. So for example, the investor. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that some of these impact investments, for all intents and purposes, are still riskier than other investments. And the need for liquidity as well is crimped because some of these investments are pretty long-term. So the investor that's able to still, in spite of the barriers of liquidity, the barriers of risk, part with some capital because they believe in the cause, because they believe in what these enterprises are able to do in connecting these vulnerable communities to value chains, to give them the dignity of work, to give them a dignified livelihood, to give them a second chance so that they're able to flourish. I think these are some of the people and entrepreneurs themselves, who disadvantage themselves, who allow their lives otherwise to be interrupted so that others can flourish. And these people, when they end up doing well, the world that watches them, claps their hands and really rejoices because the influences reverberate outwards.
Alex, you're absolutely right. So I like to say that entrepreneurs find obstacles in their path, and then they're very clever and they find ways to go around them. And social entrepreneurs look for those obstacles and they run straight at them. And that is the difference. And so of course, an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur running straight at a problem, they're going to be challenged by much slower growth in all likelihood. They'll be challenged by more risk. They'll be challenged by fewer profits. These are all the things which define a social enterprise because they're trying to do something that's never been done before. Look, if you're considering a career as a social entrepreneur and you're looking for the easy path, don't do it. And if you're an investor and if you're looking for the easy win, don't be an impact investor. That is what defines this field, is doing the hard work that hasn't been done before, that most people can't or won't do. And so in many ways, I think the struggles that social entrepreneurs face are what demonstrate that they're doing the right work. If it's too easy, you're not doing the right thing. This is intended to be hard work. And if you're an impact investor and you're making a lot of money, you're probably not doing it right either.
But surely, Ted, you would want to make some money though, right? As
You
an
know what?
investor.
That is up for everyone to decide, but I like to point out that when a philanthropist makes a grant, they earn a guaranteed and immediate negative 100% financial return. Guaranteed, immediate. Impact investing is everything to, better than that. And it could be, it could still be a negative return. Our COVID-19 emergency loan fund is supported by philanthropists who have made grants to us, and they will recover after 3 years the amount of their grant less any money that we lose. So they are all guaranteed to earn a negative financial return. It will be more than negative 100%, but they will earn less than zero. And there's no shame at all in that. And so I believe it's all about meeting the expectations that are set at the onset. And for those people who can afford to earn very little or nothing at all, or even to lose some money, I encourage them to do that, because otherwise we'll never see the change that we want in the world. It will require an adjustment in our expectations. And if everyone expects to always earn a market return, then we will have exactly what the market produces. And I'm afraid that's not what we all want.
Very well put. I think some attendees came along throughout, since the beginning to now. Welcome to all of you. We are having a very exciting discussion about impact investing and, changing the way we think about market, especially with this pandemic that is really pushing us to rethink about how and what things that we are doing and what values are we creating, not only for us, but also for the generations that are coming ahead of us. So right now, I think it's a good time to actually deep dive into the Resilience Fund, Alex. I think Ted make a case for a different way of looking at funding, a different way of looking at market returns, or even I think a different definition of what is impact returns. So can you speak a bit about Resilience Fund and how it is positioned to really save social enterprises that are really making a difference, that are really solving scalable global issues for all of us to survive this pandemic?
Sure. Allow me to start with a quote, which is really a ruling idea in my head, from an American philosopher, Henry David Thoreau, who lived in the 19th century. He had this to say. He said that for every 1,000 who hack at the leaves of evil, only one strikes at the root. Recently, in response to the COVID-19 induced circuit breaker in Singapore, a few friends and myself, we joined hands to start Project Providence in an attempt to meet some of the more immediate needs, such as shelter and food for foreign guest workers in this city. And we witnessed tremendous generosity firsthand and were able to raise something like over $150,000 in a little over 2 weeks. Yet while all those efforts are needful, I was never really able to shake off the thought that we're simply hacking away at the leaves of social injustice while leaving the root very much intact. And it is enterprises, it is entrepreneurs who are listening to this panel right now, who would travel to those places of vulnerability and suffering and disadvantage themselves to create value for others. It's those enterprises and those entrepreneurs, the benevolent, other-centered ones, that represent a real hope for many of these guest workers, many of this poor, to truly shake off the shackles of poverty, hopefully for good. But that still begs the question, why do it in the midst of a pandemic? And to that, I'll say that social investing, because these enterprises, especially in this part of the world, are often still nascent and young, they are essentially people decisions. And it follows that you only really know someone through one of two ways: time and adversity. And with some of the enterprises we're hoping to back, we've got the benefit of knowing the entrepreneurs for some time. And for others, there is the current adversity and the response to adversity that will help us to make better people decisions. So we don't just want to talk about these ideas as theories. We recognize that during this time when the economy is shuttered, there's a very real need for tangible support. And it is the reason, and just applause to the leaders, the founders of TBN, to willing to put into action this whole idea of resilience program. And this is where, as practically and as holistically as possible, we hope to support quality enterprises that strike at the root of these social injustices, at poverty, so that they don't simply survive. These enterprises don't really survive, but in time thrive to better serve the common good.
So I think we can all see in our screen here of what the resilience program is. Do you want to go into detail about each of it, Alex?
Sure. So Melvin has covered this very briefly during his kickoff panel. And so there are basically 3 legs to this resilience program. And the first one is matchmaking, where we do a bit of hand-holding with investors who are interested but do not believe they're able to make good decisions and do not know what exactly to look out for. So we come between the funders, the investors, and the enterprise, hopefully those that we've had time and opportunity to journey with, and make these recommendations and some of these legal documentation, all of that. And then the second pillar is really that of targeted grants. And that's one of, I like to think of this as productive charity. The whole idea behind productive philanthropy is that the grant is given to better equip the communities to serve as producers as opposed to consumers. So this could come, for example, yesterday I was speaking with Tamara, and she works with some refugee women, and they simply needed a little machine to print on t-shirts so that they can fulfill some of these corporate orders. And that machine doesn't cost a lot of money. It's $1,000 Sing dollars. And so it would be for little purchases like this, that I can see this grant going towards, to equip communities and supply chain to be better producers. And lastly is the resilience fund. This is where we are actually pooling funds together between TBN and local partners, one in Malaysia and one in Indonesia, to carve out a readily available pool of funds to lend as debt. And the whole idea behind this is we want to lend it at a rate that is lower than market rates, but we want to really put our money where our mouth is so that the entrepreneurs can really go for impact. But at the same time, we recognize that trust that we put in them still needs to be well placed, especially for the sake of investors. So we will be working with these enterprises to develop greater discipline and greater resilience, and to help them become better entrepreneurs and better enterprises. And how we propose to do that is really to work with Seth, the social enterprise training hub that you were talking about earlier, that Wayne helps to head for us, with other partners that are willing to even make this a better program, to put them through that, to coach them, to mentor them. At the same time, we're making capital available so that we try to, as holistically as possible, really tackle some of these challenges that we find ourselves in.
Thanks, Alex. Jen, I would like to turn over to you. And you've seen that there are interested investors, impact investors out there to help out social enterprises, and Resilience Fund is one of the available funding. And Ted mentioned that he set up one already in the US. So since you've been working a lot with social enterprises, what strategies can you impart for the social enterprises to survive this pandemic, be it from a financing strategy or also a growth or survival strategy probably at this point of time?
I guess then to link it back to Ted as well as Alex, what we have done, it's quite holistic in its view, because we're all looking at an ecosystem. Some impact investors might have the appetite for risk-adjusted market returns, like venture capitalists, as well as Citrin or slightly below market rate. But there are also perhaps like resilience funds in which they offer debt, equity, loans, whatnot. And there is also philanthropics that offers grants, not expecting any market returns. So these different stakeholders within the same ecosystem will have their own expectations and their own contributions, as well as their own terms and conditions in which the different social enterprises can approach towards. So then I guess as a social enterprise, then perhaps they need to first of all understand what their current circumstances are, what are their challenges, and what are the opportunities out there. Like in Malaysia, there might be Citrin Capital for equity investment. There might be resilience fund in which they can have some loans or debts. There might even be some grants in which they can rely on for donations for during these difficult times. So then there's all these different financial instruments in which the social enterprises can go towards. So then it really boils down to what then do they need, and whether they're the right investors. They might be a very limited impact investors in Malaysia or even Southeast Asia, because it's a fairly new industry, so to say, even if we can call it an industry. So then open up your door, just talk to many people who understands what you're trying to achieve, what impact are you trying to create. Because at the end of it, if your business fundamentals is there, I believe no matter what adversity you're facing, what challenges there are, whether there's pandemic or not, you will still be able to push through. And all these different financial instruments or financial institutions will be there along your side to help support you. Fine, you might I think a lot of social enterprises did tell me, but there's so limited fundings out there. And if there's fundings, then they will have very restrictive criteria in which you can apply for, like they only support people who supports the B40 community. That's the bottom 40% of the pyramid of the population. So then how do you, as a social entrepreneur, I cannot then tilt my mission to fit into your criteria just so I can benefit from your fund. Then I guess that at this point, then the social enterprises might have to then stick to what they really set out to, and not tilt, because don't go where the funding goes, as in go where the funding goes because it fits your purpose, but don't go where the funding goes because you just purely want the money. But instead you should really stick to the core of your mission. And then because I think it all boils down back to entrepreneurs have to be resourceful themselves. They see where are the resources and then they go towards that. That's a good quality of a real entrepreneur, and what no more a social entrepreneur. Yeah, so that's us.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Jen. I think that's very true. I think the resiliency of the social entrepreneurs itself is now being tested. And I think the resilience fund here and the resilience program actually really trying to reach out those hands out there. In Indonesia, for example, I think the Small and Medium Enterprises Ministry just said that 60 million people are going to fall back, not to poverty, but to a level that is behind them previous to the pandemic. And most of them are actually the small and medium enterprises. So yeah. So Ted, just before because I think we're almost at the end. So before we actually go into conclusion, Ted, from your perspective, right, how can the social enterprise survive this pandemic? What are the tips that you actually have rolled up on your sleeve that you can impart so that these social enterprises, that they might be good enterprises, as Gian mentioned, they have a business model, but then maybe their financial structure was not set in a way that it can survive the pandemic. Like I heard in Channel News Asia, I think they said that a lot of these small, medium enterprises, they might be forced to close business just because they have financing structure that is not, does not allow them to actually open their business. So Ted, can you impart some of your wisdom for all of us here?
Well, I'm afraid I have, primarily bad news to relay. So lots of social enterprises will go out of business. And I think it's one of the most painful things about the virus, but it will disproportionately affect poor people. And I think it will also disproportionately affect social enterprises serving those poor people. Many of the businesses that we work with, and maybe many of our prospective borrowers, rely on person-to-person contact to make a sale or to deliver a service in a way that conventional businesses can avoid or can work around. Working with very poor people, pivoting to offer your product or service online just isn't an option in most cases, particularly if you're serving people who don't have electricity, let alone a reliable internet connection. And so I'm afraid, what I have overwhelmingly is bad news. I think those social enterprises that were very quick to recognize the severity of the virus and the ones that made very deep cuts will be the ones most likely to survive. And I think many of them will need to go dormant to come back at a later date. And as I said, sadly, many of them will fail through no fault of their own. So I don't have any great words of wisdom. I would rather speak to the investors on the call and to urge them to think about what really matters. And is it that your bank account increases in value a little more? Or is it that you leave a lasting legacy and put that money to work to do the most that's needed? And so we are talking about impact investing here, but I don't want to disparage grant making by any means. I think that the virus makes it even more apparent to all of us that straight and pure philanthropy is desperately needed. But there are also many roles for the impact investor and the social entrepreneur to play.
Stella, I think you're muted.
Apologies. Apparently, I do have a bit of technical difficulties. So Ted, thank you very much. I think that's a great conclusion. Also, I think a reminder for all of us here, not only social enterprises, but also, interested funders, impact investors or grantors, or people who are thinking of putting their capital to a better use. Before we close off the session today, Alex, do you have some final words before we close off with John, and then I return the session back to Wen?
Sure. I guess I also want to address the investors in our midst and the people who have that capacity, that authority to actually make some kind of a difference. Often we think that where our heart is, there we shall direct our investments, there we shall direct our monies and our treasures. In fact, I want to offer another perspective, and a perspective that is certainly not from me, that actually where your treasure is, there your heart will be. If you are invested in the stock market, it follows naturally that it'll tug at your heart. You will be checking where the markets actually are, where these stock prices actually are. So if you truly want to care about and follow the well-being of vulnerable communities, of the refugees, of the poor, the principle then is to direct your treasure that way. I will assure you that your heart will follow suit. You will find yourself automatically caring more about, inquiring more about how that company and the community is doing. And to the others that are not able to shell out, slightly larger sums of money to support these enterprises that go to the root of the social injustices. And if you're looking at smaller sums, I'd like to suggest again that idea of productive philanthropy. I mean, it's commendable that TBN, with all that it's collecting out of this conference, putting things together, and people, all hands coming on deck, they're willing to take all of this to say, this is a catalytic capital. This is a sacrificial capital. This is our offering to the ecosystem so that investors who feel this is a bit too risky, let us take that first loss. Let us lead by example. I mean, we'll touch on the mechanics on the actual fund, hopefully a bit more tomorrow. But for the people who are not able to shell out larger sums of money, do these littler sums to TBN, and my personal assurance, and I'm sure that the leaders of TBN would follow suit, that it will be directed into the heart of the ecosystem to enable others to be producers, to encourage others to still walk this at times lonely journey.
Okay. Jan, would you like to close our session of today?
I guess to keep it short and simple, noticing the time. So I guess for all the impact investors, do realize that this is indeed an opportunity for all of us to make even greater impact, because we are really in need now. We can really represent what are the true meanings of impact investing now. There's so many social enterprises who needs this capital at right this moment. As for the social enterprises, I guess simply don't give up now. It's a difficult time. Everybody is having a difficult time, but because impact investing ecosystem, the nature of it is that we are all very sharing. So even if one funder might not be able to support you, they might be able to refer you to another funder that has the capability to perhaps support you instead. So then because of this sharing mentality between us, so then don't be afraid to seek help, I suppose. Just be all out, do what you can, continue aiming for your impact, and that's the way to go. Yeah.
Thanks, Jan. I think it's very clear. The issues are clear. The pandemic is causing a lot of social issues. We are probably pushed a decade back in terms of what we have achieved in our lifetime. So it's really the time to put everything that we have together to be able to save a lot of these social enterprises, and hence save our community and the world as well. With that, don't forget to dial in tomorrow, because we have a lot of questions here, and very good ones. I have a lot of questions myself, and we will be deep diving into the Resilience Fund as well. Thank you very much for joining in. With that, I return back to you, Wen. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella, and thank you to the panelists. Gosh, who knew an investment session could be so full of heart? I don't know if you felt it, but I definitely did. And it was a really great kickoff to the 2 session. I'm so glad we actually did it as a 2 session, because there's just so much in there that we can unpack and really address the needs, but also how can everyone come around in their own way as well. So yeah, I love that you guys said that, it's not about the big bucks. We always think, when the term investment or anything like that, you need to have hundreds and thousands of dollars, but I think all of us can do a part. So we really hope you can dial in tomorrow, which is part of the next step. So the next session for today though, is at 12 o'clock. And it's titled Surviving the Crisis. And so it's really about we have some founders, social entrepreneurs themselves talking about their experience. So I think it's for everyone. So it's not just for founders, but it's for anyone who wants to hear what goes on behind the scenes in a startup, in a social entrepreneur's world. So I think it'll really build a lot of empathy, and also just really understanding their daily struggles, how they do it. So please come along. It's at 12 o'clock today, and it's going to be a really great session. So a reminder for tomorrow at the same time for the all hands on deck. So this session part 2 at 9:30 tomorrow as well. Keep spreading the word. We're only in day 2. We've still got a couple more sessions, actually quite a lot of sessions. So you still can buy a ticket, share on social media, get the word out there. That will be fantastic. The Social Enterprise Saturday. So on this Saturday, we will have a lot of social enterprises talking about what they do. So please dial in. It's open to the public from 9 a.m. to 1:30. Please come along because it's it's getting a glimpse and really understanding what they do. Sorry, I'll skip back to the slide, which I forgot, is get connected to us at TBN. If you're interested, our emails are all there and it's just been put on the side chat as well. Please feel free to email us if you want to volunteer or just get involved or have questions. We have a poll that's going to come up right now just to get feedback on the session. I really hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. So if you could just take a couple of seconds just to answer, I think there's about 4 or 5 questions in there. That would be fantastic. But I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists, to Stella for a great, you just moderated it so well. And I'm actually really excited about tomorrow to hear more in this area. So thank you. Have a blessed day ahead. I know we're 3 minutes late, so I know you have to go. Please, you can leave and we'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning again. Thank you, everyone.
Well, I'll just leave the poll up for a little while longer.
And for the panelists, if you don't mind just staying back, I think we will just catch up and just kind of plan tomorrow's session. That would be great.
I'm sorry for being late.
Okay.
I said it for tomorrow.
Oh, good. No, it was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed it. Alex, you are so philosophical. I love it.
Yes. Inspiring, Alex.
Funny.
Ted, your wisdom, loved it too. Thank you so much.
Stopped out though.
I can't see.
Oh, has Ted logged out? That's okay. Okay, so for the panelists, there's a link for us to jump into the next room. So if you click on that one, we will see you. But thank you to everyone who came to this session again. Take care.